Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Um, I guess we are ready to start. I had a conversation today with Morgan, so I have some more information to share with you for our meeting and make it as fruitful as possible. I didn't print out my agenda, but I'm assuming we have call to order. I'm sorry for the delay. Call to order. Can I have a call?
So move if that's what you want. Yeah.
Yeah. Second?
Okay.
Can second that.
Okay, thanks. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. And our minutes from our last meeting, can I have a motion to approve? Or any discussion?
I move to approve.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Okay, so we move ahead. So as you all know, I think, and Jeremy, you can talk about this more if he wants to, but we've signed a contract with the Collins Center and they can work with us to get it done by the June 30th deadline. So that's great news. I was a little bit nervous as I started talking to her and to other people, consulting groups, that there were so many towns that were going to be doing this grant and there's only a 6-month time period. There's only a few. I mean, I'm sure we could find somebody else, but people who've done this before and have the system down, I think we were lucky to get them to agree to take on our project. So I'm kind of psyched about it. And I spoke to Morgan and she said she couldn't meet with us now, but she said, and I'm just going to throw out some of these things as they come up, but her earliest is February 5th. So like a few weeks. We usually meet the second Wednesday, the 12th. I don't know if anybody is opposed to meeting on, she could do either one. And that doesn't mean that it's holding up the process at all. They're going to be starting to do work, getting a vendor for our physical inventory and things like that. But it gives them a chance to work up a timeline for us and present what they want to do. And it will give us a chance to give them our input. So what does everybody think of the 5th versus the 12th? Is there anybody who can't make it?
I can't make it on the 5th.
Okay. Can everybody do the 12th?
Yes.
Was it our regular time at 5, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I asked her if she could do in person. She thought maybe it'd be better to save those for when we, have things like at a certain point where we really need to meet in person. So she thought Zoom would be okay. But we can continue to discuss that. But as for now, I think she prefers Zoom for our first meeting. Okay, that takes care of that. Go to the 12th. And as you know, we applied for $50,000. I think she told me we really need to call it 49,999 to be under having to get multiple bids, but close enough. And there's components. I just sent you our scope of services in an email about a half an hour ago. When I wrote up the scope of services, I just put in everything that the MOD included in what they would consider a scope of services. I mean, I just pretty much took all their bullets, anything I could find. And so that doesn't mean we need all of those things done. But she said we need to kind of prioritize what we want to do because the money will only go so far. So looking at the physical inventory that we're going to talk about with the spreadsheet, if we were to include all of the sidewalks that we have in town, that's going to take up, some of the money. If we include different buildings that aren't our typical municipal buildings, that will take up a little bit of money. But then again, we have a small town and it's probably, it's not going to absorb all of it. So why don't we start? Well, let me just finish the whole conversation I had with her and then we'll do the spreadsheet, talk about the physical inventory. We can discuss what we think. But I mentioned the survey and how we were interested in getting community input. She said that if that's our priority, that's fine. And we might want to encompass other groups in town, like instead of everybody doing their own, and I don't think anybody's doing a survey right now, and people have done them in the past, but get our best questions that we really want input on. She's kind of down on surveys. She feels like there's not enough responses. Um, and that the data they collect isn't really, they're not able to do much with. And they have some, I guess, really good, yeah, sure, Kelly.
Does she know what surveys we've already done and have a chance to assess their usefulness?
No, I don't think she does, but we would definitely, I'll send those to her if we decide that that is a priority. I think she felt like it doesn't reach, or people, not enough people respond. And I think we have to decide as a group. I mean, I think we could really use this survey as kind of, if it's a good one, and if we can really try to get people's input in a variety of ways, maybe we have a few functions or meetings, or discuss it at schools, discuss it at Council on Aging. If we make a big push, which she said they have all the marketing materials to help us. I just feel like those results could be beneficial when a project comes up in town that that the town wants to push through and needs a vote. It just gives them more support if that's something on our town's priorities, or it's something that people are interested in. So that's the other thing we have to discuss, whether we want to use some of the money for a survey. She said, if just really fine tune the questions and make it simple. I told her some of the surveys we received have been difficult to fill out, and, we'd want to make it as simple as possible, but also giving us the right data. And finally, on that physical inventory, we discussed, like I said, sidewalks, depending on, she said it's important probably to include the ones that connect public spaces and stuff in town, perhaps public buildings. But also, we've talked a lot about trails and how that's a big part of our town. And so we identified a couple of trails that we wanted the physical inventory to include, and they would, if they did include those, and they would give us a roadmap of how to make those ADA accessible. And like Kelly, I know you're going to point out, we don't necessarily want them to be ADA compliant because that's very difficult to do and expensive. So we have to think about that too, because I don't think they would give us a lesser, we're looking for accessible, but not necessarily so ADA. So that's something to consider. But it might not hurt to have some of those trails looked at, so that we have a starting point. So anyway, and then we were going to talk to Dave about all of these recreation issues. So that's what I got out of my conversation today. And I'd like to open it up to discussing that spreadsheet and physical inventory, and that includes recreation spots too. Yeah, Kelly.
Just a big overall question. The spreadsheet and her scope of work sounds like they intend to focus exclusively on existing facilities. And we were thinking of including new facilities like the pavilion, additional sidewalks around Jameson Field, things that they would not now look at and say, yes, this is compliant or not, but maybe advise us on how to do it when we do. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I imagine it is. I don't know. I don't know the answer, but it is like a public space that we have right now,
Right.
even though it's not used to that. So we could include it in the inventory and say, and she did say, if you put in notes about certain things, they will look at it. So I guess they would, but I'll have to clarify that.
Okay, that would be just here is an open space not being used for anything. We want to convert it to a public meeting space with a pavilion.
And show them our plans, because I think we do have some plans for that, right?
I don't know.
I've seen a landscape plan anyway.
Oh. Perfect.
All right, that's a good question. I I was gonna ask Dave what he thought about the spreadsheet and if he wanted to give us any fill-in, if you guys have that on your, I don't know if you printed it out or if we want to pull that up onto the screen. I didn't print it out. I don't know if Jeremy is able to share hosting because I do have it. I could pull it up for you, but one question was, is the first question was the Pine Hill School, is that used for any municipal purposes?
It is. So I sent out, you probably haven't had a chance to look at it, Nicole, right? As we were in the waiting room, I sent out a spreadsheet, similar to the one you sent out, just from a recreation perspective
Okay,
of the facilities that we use. It has the same type of information that you're looking for um, in terms of the principal use of the facility and the location or address for it. But to answer your question directly, for the last few summers and for some period of time even before that, Sherborn Recreation has utilized Pine Hill School for their summer go-around program each summer.
oh, there we go. Great. Are they using the classrooms?
They use, it depends on the summer and what's going on. So, for example, last summer we added a new robotics program, and so that sort of expanded the footprint of the space that we were using. I think last summer, I want to say that they were using the cafeteria, the adjacent auditorium, and maybe a few classrooms, and then of course the outdoor space um, during the summer go-round program weeks, which is 5 weeks over the summer, starting in late June and operating through the end of July.
Okay. And what about, and the gym, I suppose, is being used, is that used? I know there's basketball. Is that a town activity?
Yeah, there may be youth organizations that reserve or rent that space. Sherborn Recreation is not directly um, doing programming through there.
Okay,
We're only utilizing Pine Hill School during the June, July timeframe during the summer vacation.
okay. So is it a municipal building? Like, I guess it is, isn't it?
Well, it's a building of the town of Sherborn, so for a municipality, I think I would say it is.
Yeah, that's her question. I wonder if they can do just parts of the building. I guess the reason I'm asking is I think usually she said schools and housing authorities are done separately.
I mean, the good news is the school is fairly accessible, um, by virtue of its function.
Right.
Um, so that may be why they excluded it. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll mention that. I mean, the fire station, is this accessed by the public? I imagine that needs to be checked for ADA requirements as well.
They have like an open house every year, and I think they've hosted some council on aging stuff this past year as well.
I mean, also, if you hired someone in the fire station that had a disability, they have to be able to access it. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, I believe they have accessible bathrooms, parking, they have an elevator,
Yeah.
egress. Like, I think it's fairly accessible as is.
Okay, where did that disappear to? There we go. Okay, so this isn't that hard of a spreadsheet to follow. We just have to see what we want to add to it. But Farm Pond, I don't know what the address is, but
I said Lake Street on my spreadsheet because I couldn't get a hard address for it, but
okay.
someone else has one. we can use.
Nicole, I have a question about the ADA self-evaluation. So are these evaluations being done from a physical accessibility, or are they being done from an all sort of ADA broad, if you're holding a public event, do they have something for the hearing impaired, that kind of thing?
Yes. Yep. It's not just the physical, it's yes, hearing impaired, all of those things. Which is important. And that's what they cover in the in this section. Which is important, and I don't know if the Pine Hill School has enough accommodations actually for hearing impaired. I have one child who's hearing impaired, and we never really pushed it, but if it had been a more severe situation, they would have had to make more changes, I would think. So anyway, it would be good to have those results.
So Kathy had a question in the chat about whether or not the post office could be added um, to have a ramp, handicap ramp.
Oh, right.
Where is this?
The post office.
Oh,
Yep. Hi, it's
Hi.
Kathy. So my husband the other day, about a month or two ago, was trying to get into the post office. And we parked in front of the post office in the handicap spot. And then he's in his wheelchair and he's like, how do I get up there? And he had to literally wheel all the way across the whole parking lot and then enter the sidewalk by the bank, which, it's not the end of the world, but it was kind of arduous.
A bit unsafe too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then you have to take your wheelchair through that parking lot, which is kind of treacherous, with people backing out and stuff. Wow, that's, I think, a huge point.
yes, they could just use a curb cut there, right?
Yeah.
So my question on that one would be, is that something we can even do anything about though? As a
I know, I'm
municipality,
wondering,
it's
does
a
the
federal
post,
government building.
can the post office do it at their expense?
Correct. So that post office, I believe, is on, I think the federal government leases that from a private entity. That private entity, it may be worthwhile to have our chief building official take a look to see if there's any building code or zoning compliance issue. But I believe for the purpose of this study and the grant, we're contemplating doing a study of publicly owned and maintained facilities, town buildings mainly. The post office is not one of those.
Right, but it's something that we could pursue separately as a
Correct.
committee.
Yeah, I think the best avenue is to have Chris Kay, our chief building official, take a
In the
look.
past, I know that some people on the committee approach different places in town, and that's why we have some added handicap spaces now, and why we have some curb cuts that we do, is because they just went around to the businesses and requested like what Roses has in front of it. That's not a public building, but they have a ramp there. So sometimes just they asking can help.
Yeah, certainly.
But it just seems like something's amiss if you have a disabled parking space and no way to get safely into the building from that space. That's just not right. I come across that quite a bit. It drives me bananas. And I haven't tried to bring Reese into the post office, but that's a, all right, I'll ask around on that and everybody else who wants to ask around, but, that should be something we can do outside of this grant, but, I do agree that needs to be figured out. Something's wrong there. Okay. Dave, do you want to continue on your, I didn't look at your spreadsheet, but do you want to talk more about recreation facilities? Is there anything on that spreadsheet that you need to add?
I mean, I just broke out Jameson a little bit more. separating out the tennis courts and pickleball courts from the baseball field. Mainly because there's we have a separate project that maybe looking to do that would address some accessibility specific to the tennis court, pickleball court area, as well as it would benefit one of the baseball fields in the snack bar, but not necessarily all four baseball fields. So I had the tennis courts separate from the baseball fields as a line item, but you could certainly leave it consolidated. It's up to you. I also had included, although you already have it up above, was Pine Hill School because we utilize it for the summer go round program each summer. I also had Unity Farm. They host our adult yoga classes there. That's a private property that's not owned or maintained by the town.
Okay. Yeah, she said, I think we have to decide, how many of those private places we would include. She says sometimes there are, but where does the Council on Aging meet now? They don't have a separate building.
No, I think they go to the community center for coffee and something.
They go to the Pilgrim Church too on a regular basis.
It's true.
Oh, okay, so they just, but those are more like, yeah, they're events. They don't have a central building or anything that is but where are their offices?
Town hall.
Oh, okay, so that's where it is. Does that mean like Pilgrim Church is included then?
They certainly use it all year round on a regular basis.
Well, at least once a month, or how often are they there?
Usually once a week for their the lunch they have there.
Yeah, every Thursday they have lunch at the Pilgrim Church.
Okay.
So
And of course, the reason they do that at all these private places is because the town does not have a center. So that's why they're using these other facilities.
I guess my question would be, how much influence would we have on these other facilities? Can we, if we do an assessment, but I mean, does that mean we can do anything about Pilgrim Church to become more accessible? I mean, I always think about kind of like, what would we get out of that assessment of doing Pilgrim Church or another private facility if they don't have to comply to those guidelines?
Kelly?
They don't have to comply, but I think it would be very useful to them to know of deficiencies that they might want to address. I think something like the church that is used frequently, we should do, and do it in a spirit of cooperation and support. Certainly let them know that we're doing it. I think they'd be pleased.
Also, the location of that near our future town green, where we want to have that connection, and Pilgrim Church being so close to our other municipal buildings, it does kind of make sense. I guess it's a question on how much can we get in and how much is it going to cost and how much does it take away from our other services that we're looking to do.
Yeah, I was thinking, if we're thinking of like prioritizing, like, the town buildings would probably come first over the non-town buildings.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Go on, Jeremy.
yeah, and I think just to help focus your work, the grant that we've received from the Commonwealth is specifically for town-owned properties. So I think looking at how the public roadways to connect to private properties is certainly within scope, but actual study of private property, the Commonwealth may believe is outside of the scope of this grant.
Yeah, Kelly?
There is a question in the yellow about the community center. I just wanted to clarify, the town owns the community center and it's
Correct.
leased to the Community Center Foundation.
Yep.
It gets an immense amount of use, and old building, it ought to be included.
Oh, that was the question. Is this a municipal building? I thought it was all on the Pine Hill. You're right. Okay. That makes more sense. I was like, what?
Yeah, the
Um,
1858 townhouse is a town-owned structure.
yeah, right. That definitely has to be included. Um, okay, so what I'll do is I'll take that input. I'll ask her about Pilgrim Church, but I think I agree with Jeremy that that most likely won't be included. She mentioned buildings like the a housing authority or a school, you know, which aren't necessarily private properties like the Pilgrim Church would be. So I'll get clarification on that. And I'll use Dave's input on the recreation facilities and spell it, you know, divide it out a little bit more. But does that cover all of our areas, Dave, as far as public space?
From a recreation perspective, yes, with the exception of some of the aforementioned trails you were talking about, if you were going to specify the trails.
Right. Right. Because we do have, you know, so much green space around those trails. It's kind of hard to and I'm looking at that map that we picked up at a meeting the other day of the publicly accessible trails. And there's so much space. But let's open that up to discussion. Your choice, sidewalks that you think would be important and trails. Who wants to go? Kelly.
As a trails fan, I will opt for sidewalks because I think we know a lot about trails. We can make a lot of recommendations for improving the trails for a variety of uses. But I think their technical expertise would probably be much better used on sidewalks.
And which ones would you identify?
I get a back off that. I certainly, I'm not sure how we integrate this study with the street study that's coming along, the big deal that's going to also include sidewalks.
Well, Frank and I met with Heidi about that. And is Frank still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, what do you think, Frank, came out of that? I think that we had decided in the end that they're two separate entities.
Right. And theirs is like a year off too, right?
Yeah.
Where ours has to be in by June, theirs won't be awarded till sometime in June and then go on thereafter. So it depending on, you know, how much, what we have for funds, we could specify some of them and then if we need more, we could try and put it in the planning grant or get them to put it in the planning grant.
Yeah, she gave us the impression that it would be a years long project. So it didn't really, it wasn't going to be really something that I guess like what you might be asking is the whole area of downtown, if these intersections are all changed, what would be the point of doing the sidewalks, right? And I tend to agree. If they're going to be changing the way an intersection works and doing all the sidewalks as part of it, then that will have to be ADA compliant when they do it.
I think a big lack for us is, say, from the fire station down towards the entrance to Pine Hill on the right-hand side heading towards Natick. There's not a good path there. And there was also talk about putting a path maybe on the inside of Jamison Field, you know, right along the property line on the left as you go up Cemetery Lane and turn left to cross over, or might be a possibility.
Yeah. And Dave, you said that's been in part of a rec plan.
Well, I
Wasn't
mean, we've identified it as something that could be, you know, included as a upgrade to the facility, but it's not on this. It's not any specific design or plan yet. but you could foresee if the core project gets approved and you have a ADA accessible pathway from the parking lot to the snack concession area over to the courts, you could connect to that, along the perimeter and so on and so forth. So it could be a piece of the puzzle. It's not in any active plan right now.
Is there a sidewalk down from the fire station to the park down there, or the entrance to the Jameson baseball? Is that,
No,
No,
no?
no,
Is that included in the kind of scope of doing Jameson, those tennis courts over?
no.
No. Okay. Oh. Address, 201 Lake Street. Awesome. I'll put that in. I understand where Kelly's coming from on the trails. Does anybody have any other input on that? I mean, if we were to ask them for input on certain trails, they would put it right up to ADA standards, which is a significant amount of work. However, that opens, some potential trails that, might be beneficial for people connecting to, say, Pine Hill from other parts of the town. And there might be some trails that are more easily made compliant.
Would we want to approach this from like a prioritization perspective? Like where would we, okay, when you do sidewalks, is it access to buildings? Then what's next? Is it going to be public facilities where the trails are the primary access to those facilities, facilities without sidewalk access and stuff like that? Because like, to your point, I think we can go down that rabbit hole and open a lot of doors where like maybe we can't even do anything about them within the scope of this $50,000.
Right.
But if we say we start with this and kind of like how much can you get done within the overall scope, maybe that'd be a way to approach it. 'Cause I do like the idea that like we have it in like in the open space plan that like a lot of these areas are accessible via trails, if not sidewalks. So if it's a public facility and you rely on the trails to kind of connect, Pine Hill School to someplace else, and then it's certainly worth a look at.
I agree.
and of course, this $50,000 is just to look at it and have them tell us what to do, not to do anything, right?
Exactly. Exactly. But it's kind of nice to have somebody tell you what needs to be done.
It's nice to have when you go to town meeting to have some, professional backup on it.
Yeah, I think the only thing I think about is like there's a lot of things we can cover in the scope of this, and that 50,000 will go pretty quick.
Right. And if we use it all on this physical inventory, which, like you said, is just going to point out the deficiencies, it's not going to do anything to get it fixed. It's just pointing it out in a list. Is that how we want to spend all the money? Do we still want to have some public input to use that as another avenue for getting support for any changes in the future? And I will say that Morgan is very interested in so this plan is self-assessment and transition. She said that her predecessor concentrated a lot on the self-assessment side and came up with these, 150-page reports, but nothing was done with these reports. And she likes the idea of making sure that there is a plan of transition. So she would put more of the focus towards how do we change the policies, or, I think a really important priority might be our website, and making sure that's looked at from all different disabilities and how that it can be more accessible. But it's also, town policies. It's about how to train staff to handle when someone comes in, with a certain disability, and what are the procedures in place. So she's kind of interested in making sure that all those aspects are up to snuff and with ADA compliance, and making sure that we can help people, which is, a really valid point. That's, this is all the public buildings, the public services. We should be able to help anybody who comes looking for answers or looking for information or coming to a meeting, in all the ways that, and, you know, we can't even think of all the ways that situations that might come up. So, that's what she wants to use some of the funds for as well. But maybe we don't agree. I don't know. Everything seems important to me, so.
I think that transition part is really important because, you know, a lot of times, like even in like our own professional lives, you spend a lot of work building a plan, but if you don't have like identifying problems, if you don't have a plan to execute how to fix them, things just stall. And getting some advice about how we get traction on some of these things. Like, for example, say with the hearing impairment in the school, they come back and say, you don't address this problem, you don't address the crossings for the visually impaired well enough. Well, what's the solution to that? What are the options? You know, like how do we get started down that pathway?
Right,
I think that information is very helpful to the town as well, because like if we go out there and we got a problem, we got to solve it, going to the town and saying we have a possible pathway to solve this.
right.
I think it's really valuable.
Yep, I think so too. And that's what she wants to make sure, just to make sure that this whole report is doing something and we actually work towards an end result that is implemented. And it makes sense. Kelly.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, but I think a big purpose of the report is paving the way for implementation grants from the MOD. They give out a lot of money to build stuff and do stuff. And if we spread this self-assessment too thin, it's not going to put much oomph behind particular proposal. So I'd like to shorten it, look at transition, and anticipate implementation proposals.
Yeah. So what does everybody feel with the list that we have so far? If we added in Pine Hill, which seems to be important because we are using that, and maybe in the future we'll be using that in more and more summertime and things like that. I don't know about Unity Farm is like, you know, that's in, we might be, that's just really going, it would be helpful to them, I'm sure, but that's probably going to be a lot of work to take away from what we have. So let's think about the sidewalks that connect the town buildings first. I mean, when we talked, actually, we talked about the sidewalk from like Pilgrim Church or Dunkin' Donuts area over to the town hall, the crossing. Didn't we talk about that? I mean, I know there's a crosswalk now, but making sure, because if we have people coming from the Council on Aging over to use other facilities or go up to the town hall or the library. But the town hall, police station, library are all together, so it's just getting fire station, Pine Hill, and possibly down towards Pilgrim Church.
Does that include the town green and pavilion?
I'll have to ask her because it hasn't been done before, because it isn't there, it's not existing, but I do think that makes sense. And that's all in the same area of the public buildings and the scope, so. I don't know if they can go off based off the plans that have been put through. Although if plans are put through, they'd have to be ADA compliant anyway.
Well, give it a try.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the other thing too to keep in mind here, and maybe this is something you can ask her as well, like there's ADA compliant, but then how does this all kind of connect together? You know, like the whole town center idea, like, yeah, you can have one parking lot with like, you know, some spaces and it's connected by a sidewalk to one building. You have another building next door, there's no sidewalk that connects it. technically maybe both buildings are ADA compliant, but you don't have that connectivity and you have to take the long way around or something like that. So, I think I like the idea of having, the public access, the buildings and the access to them as part of the sidewalk plan.
I think that makes a
And,
lot of
and kind
sense.
of what it looks like in the big picture.
Yeah. And that can be how we narrow down what areas we're looking at.
Mhm. I do agree though, taking Unity farm off that not being a public building or space.
Kathy agrees too. Okay.
Now, when they do the facilities, they do like the whole like compliance of the facility, just to confirm that's the case. So, because I know in the scope, we talk about like policies and things within the buildings, and this basically covers all of that.
This
ADA,
grant
so like
or this,
no, I mean like so we put it like location for ADA evaluation, like town hall. It covers all the aspects of town hall. I just want to make sure that we're not just talking about like this. Jeremy, you're nodding your head yes, so it sounds like that. Okay.
right. We're talking specifically about the physical inventory, which they subcontract out. And
Yep.
then they'll go in, I don't know if they subcontract it to someone else or if they do it themselves, but they will go through, yes, the policies and the website, things like that.
So I just had another question. I know like I don't want to move away too much from the physical part, but like there's also the policies and practices as far as that as well. Do we want to make sure that gets addressed as well? Do we have any, I mean, do they do all programs we have going on? So like when Dave provides a list of like all the physicals, the locations of fields and the activities that are going on, or anything, like these, you want to make sure those are being covered?
Can you give me an example?
Well, okay, so I'll give an example outside of the fields. So when we have town meetings that are supposed to be open to the public, we do it on the second floor of the town hall. Are we meeting all the ADA considerations for that? I think I remember doing one of the trainings for town meetings and they talk about having like, if there's somebody that's hearing impaired, you should have a Zoom link available with captions. Provided, are we doing this at town meetings or do we have a link system or loop system, I'm sorry, in the town hall that people who are hearing impaired can connect to? And things like that, make sure that that stuff's being covered within the assessment as well.
Yes. Yep. I think that is part of the physical inventory, but I will, and I'm pretty sure that's what is listed in the scope, but I'll
Yeah, I guess my point would be, like, let's say you're doing a town meeting or you're doing, I mean, like a committee meeting or something like that, right? And it's not in town hall, you move away from the physical building. There are still some accessibility concerns that you have to address. So like, if I came into this call and I'm like, I need captions. Okay, you gotta make sure you have captions available within the meeting, things like that. I mean, that always my most obvious example because of what we deal with here at our house every day. But things like that I think are important to make sure we address as well. And the hearing impairment, physical disabilities are within our immediate line of sight. But what about the things that are not? Like we don't always think about those. And it mentions in your scope, hearing impairment, manual impairments, alternative communication measures. So just something to think about.
totally, and I agree. It's not just the physical. I will double check with her to make sure, but I'm quite certain that that's what the scope includes. But for sure, and also with the website, making sure that's accessible and I'm just a thought, like, what if you have say autism or you have some kind of sensory impairment? How I don't know what policies are in place for that. So this will be educational,
Well, certainly, I think so.
and eye-opening. So yes, I will ask about that.
Yeah, I always keep coming back to the idea like, we got $50,000 here. It's just, it seems like, in some ways it seems like a lot, but then sometimes it seems like we're asking for a lot. Just want to make sure that, you know.
I just
we do what
wonder
we do.
if we could have some perspective, like, what does it cost like to assess town hall or Pine Hill School? I mean, maybe they can't give us a dollar figure, like, is it $6,000 to do town hall and 8,000 to do the school? I mean, it's sort of hard to figure as we're adding or taking things away that you want to look at, have some perspective on what it costs.
Right,
agree.
and is that including all of the disabilities that we're talking about and the hearing impairments and the physical accessibility issues and other issues? Is that all encompassing? And yeah, how much per building would that be? Okay, I'll try to get an idea of what from her, how much we can include, but I think we do need to include our main municipal spaces as far as the physical inventory and our I mean, she's granted, I don't know what other towns are applying for funds, but she didn't seem to think that we had so many public buildings and public spaces that it was, you know, we have a small town, so but it's a good question, how much money will be left over, and to make sure that we have the funds for the important points of making sure that when you come to like a town meeting or anything, that you have that the town is trained and has the ability to um, help anyone who has a different disability. Are there any, so are town meetings now taking place in the library? Is anything over at the middle school and high school
Yes,
still?
town meeting takes place at Lindquist Common at the middle school, high school.
All right. She asked about the town meeting, so that's a good point.
I think there was a good point raised as well as far as not only access to, say, town meeting, physical access, but also, the information that maybe like the procedures at town meeting and how information's provided. Um, I think that was a good point that someone made earlier that would be helpful to include in the scope so that we could get some guidance on how best to do that for public meetings.
Yep, I think that's really where she wanted to focus. This is what I got from Morgan, that training the staff on how to handle all of those things and to make sure that they're inclusive and that we're doing the right process. So yeah, I think that will be, and it's very important. Okay, great. So just it helps, but it doesn't help because we don't really know how much we can get in. And what about the survey? I'm sorry, I missed Kathy's question. Let's see. Okay. They have a huge room upstairs open for residents to utilize. Which place has a huge room upstairs?
Oh, that's old. That was when we were talking
Oh.
about the police and the fire station.
Oh, what was your recent comment, Kathy?
I was just mentioning, like you had said, the website would be great to have that updated, and I was saying, like, it would be great if there was for someone who might be blind, is there a way to either make it so like you could hit a button and you could have a walkthrough and if you can't see it or if you're visually impaired. I don't know. I don't know what other towns are doing, but it would be very interesting to see, and we might even be able to get like a Boy Scout or an Eagle Scout or some, Girl Scout Gold Award who would be willing to help us do the website, but that's probably a topic maybe for another day, I guess.
Yeah, or like Frank mentioned, applying for MOD grants
Yeah.
afterwards. Yeah, Jeremy.
Yeah, just to add context for the website. So recently, the town of Sherborn received a grant to update the town's website, which has happened. So that the website has been updated. And as part of that scope of work, the consultant, the vendor that did the work, was obligated to make it ADA compliant. So as of the date of the launch of the new website, it was supposed to be ADA compliant. A lot of that is to keep it continuously ADA compliant by the new information that gets added. So I think maybe some of the scope of the help from this current study could be, what procedures we need to follow to make sure that it stays in compliance as new information is added or more documents are added. Is there a way that we're supposed to create a PDF or a type of document that makes it accessible? Because what would happen with the website is that over time it becomes less and less accessible based on our maintenance and updates on it.
Right.
So
Again, that's where she would say she would come in and train. That would be part of this grant. We could definitely,
Great.
and that's a really good point because the website will just be added to and changed and morph into something else.
Jeremy, was the town compelled to do that, or is it something that the vendor did as part of the?
As part of the website, the town was compelled to have it become ADA compliant as part of the grant we received from the Commonwealth.
Okay.
And it was included in the scope of work to the consultant or to the vendor. But again, that, sort of static as they turned over their work to the town. They had done that work to make it ADA compliant, but a year in, have we drifted a little away from that ADA compliance? I'm not sure.
Okay. And then I think they review our policies, for hiring and firing and posting meetings and all that stuff, what needs to be put on. So, and what Morgan is saying is, they can put that in a report, but she wants to include making sure that there's training in place or a plan for training so that we actually do what we're asking, what we're trying to find out. So I think that makes a lot of sense. We don't want to leave it static. It's just like the example of the website. We want to make sure that we know what we're doing and can continue to be as accessible in so many different ways. Okay.
If folks are more curious about on the website accessibility, actually on the main web page, you go all the way down to the bottom, there's a like accessibility link. And if you click on that, it gives you the information as how the website is accessible. The guidelines that were followed to develop it, the browser accessibility information, the plugins that are used, and the supported assistive technology that the website's compatible with. So if you're curious, there's a little bit more information there. It's a little over my head, but just for awareness. There was thought put into the new website, but like I said, it's over time, I'm told websites can become less compliant based on, our own use and updates.
Yeah, I think with this, if we get the best bang for our buck would be having things like that, making sure our website, making sure our meetings going forward are all encompassing. That's going to be, such a benefit to the town. And then these, the physical inventory, yes, it's not going to be done, but it will all be listed out. And I think that is something we can use, as Frank pointed out, to apply for grants. So that's also a benefit. The question is, what do we think about the survey? She was curious if we felt like the survey was important to us as town. I told her that, we have an open space report with recreation report coming out soon. We have, a master plan that will be updated at some point, and all of this input will be very helpful. But what do you guys think? Yeah, Kelly.
We've had these townwide surveys, but over the past 6 months or a year, we've also talked about sources of information that we have not gone to in the schools and so forth. And there was a short list of them. And I think whether it's the consultant or ourselves, we ought to pursue some of these.
Right.
We
Maybe it
planned
can be,
we
what's that?
planned on doing it ourselves at one point.
Right. And I told her that. And I said, there's a lot of benefits of having this survey, not just for the Disability Advisory Committee. And so she thought that was great. And she said, they have, like I said, the resources to help us, marketing, setting up things. But if we wanted to have events or something where we try to get to different groups of people, I guess it's just how much effort we want to put into making sure we get the results, and also effort in our input to the survey to make sure it's exactly what information we want to get.
Well, Kelly, you've been on quite a few of these projects where they did surveys. Did you find what you got back was helpful?
Moderately, to some extent, yes. One of the values was to validate what we already knew. But one suggestion, I think, Nicole, it was yours, was there's the school newspaper. Ask, this is not just limited to ADA accessibility, but ask sort of what improvements people can think of to make everything more accessible, whether it's technically full ADA or not. And if we're crunched for money with the consultant, with Morgan, I think we could do a fair amount of useful work here informally on our own without a full-fledged survey.
Yeah, that's true. Because we can use our own, electronic forms. We could get maybe partial guidance for them and just kind of take it on our own. And she was even saying that, like if we did events on our own, in addition to, going to all the different electronic ways we would, through the town, through the COA and through the schools, seeing if we can get people to respond. But if we aren't getting the responses, maybe having a couple of events targeted towards parents with young children and how do they want to access the community, and then have something with the COA and invite them for their input and try to, make that effort. And if we're willing to do that, which, that's kind of what we're here for. We might be able to do a lot of that ourselves.
Yeah,
And that would be a broader focus than the scope of the contract anyway, because we're looking at a wider range of disabilities and alternative uses.
Yeah. What were you saying, Kevin?
No, I agree with the idea that we could do it on our own. I think of the grant as kind of like we have this set amount of like funds to do work with. Let's prioritize on other things that we need to do in terms of like making sure we're up to accessibility standards, identify any shortcomings we have in a town. And then as an advisory committee, we could pursue some additional activities beyond that. But I think the priority should be like, where are the shortcomings, what do we need to address?
Right.
And then kind of go after the community needs once those are done.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Because you did say like surveys can suck up so much money and so much time because of the, putting it together, but also the analysis and things like that, which, I don't know. I'm fairly confident we could do it. We had come up with a good plan before this, so our plan B, we were working on. I guess I'll ask her how much, all right, so we have a kind of an idea of what our priorities are and what we're thinking, and making sure that we are getting the connections to those spaces and that all of the different aspects of disability is addressed, and for training of staff for town meetings, small meetings, recreational times where you have issues, ways to accommodate people. So everybody's trained, and then that we know going forward, it's going to be able to continue and rather than be stagnant. Same thing with the website, making sure that we have the tools and the training to make sure that everything continues on being accessible. I think that is the general purpose. Does everybody agree with that?
Sure.
I'll try to put it in a better, put it down in words a little bit better, but I'll put something together. How's this? And you guys can comment on it. Send your feedback to me, then we don't have to worry about open meeting laws, but I'll start something of what we've discussed, and then feel free to comment in, and then we'll try to send something to her by the beginning of next week. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Because I don't want to go too long. Yes, Jeremy.
Yeah, as I was just thinking about when you were talking about this, the survey aspect, about other tools that the town may have already available, that you might be able to use instead of through the consultant. The town does have an account, a constant contact account, that's available for use, that does have a survey component. So that there's survey tools there, create sort of a whole survey. You have to come up with your questions and how you ask them. But that is a platform that could be used for such a survey to gather the information. So,
That's great. Yeah, those constant contact, that's a big deal company, because they reach a lot of people. I know I'm on some of those. You can see that at the bottom of your marketing materials. That's fantastic. Okay, great. Any other comments? Okay, great. Then I will put that together. Shall we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay, cool. Thank you guys so much. This was a great meeting. We will keep moving forward, and I'm sure we'll hit the deadline fine and have so many great new things to come out of it. So,
And
I'll,
Nicole, thank you.
Thank you very much.
all right, guys.
Thank
We'll see
you.
you later.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I know.
Thank you.
Bye.